Trek Profiles Podcast, Episode 18, recorded November 2018. This is the Trek Profiles Podcast, where each episode we sit down with a Star Trek fan. We learn their story, and we try to figure out why in the world Star Trek matters to them, to you, and to all of us Trekkies. I am John, your intrepid host of this whole enterprise, and I welcome you to this, the Trek Profiles Podcast, Episode 18. If you wish to get in touch with us, you can reach us at feedback@trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or Twitter at TrekProfiles. If you wish to leave us a voicemail, there are two ways to do that. You can call our automated voicemail line at 609-512-LLAP. That's 609-512-5527. Or you can leave us a voice message on our website at Tricorder Transmissions via SpeakPipe. Spoiler warnings! As we record this, we are in the middle of the short treks, so all previous Trek content up to and including that point is fair game and may be discussed during this episode. You have been warned, human. As always, my trusty sidekick and co-host is the supremely serious, swimmingly sensible, always sincere M5 Multitronic unit. Greet the listeners, M5.
The M5 awaits instructions.
M5, let's have the announcements.
Announcements posted.
If you didn't know, we are a part of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network, and there are so many great shows on Tricorder. And in fact, our guest on this episode, Aly Martinez, is working on a new show that's going to be joining the network. We're so excited. So keep your eyes on our social medias for the premiere. And if you enjoy this, or any of the shows on the network, you can support us via Patreon. Support at any level will get you access to all kinds of special content, extended and uncut episodes, and that sort of thing. So here's a special thanks to all of our wonderful Patreon supporters. There are other ways to support this show and the network as well. Sharing the show on your Bookface or on Twitter and on your other social medias also helps, along with your 5-star reviews and such on your podcasting app or platform or whoever you're listening to us. We'd appreciate it so very much. All right, then, let's talk some Kobayashi Maru feedback. These items are from episode 16 with Bonnie Moss. Question 1, it's dinner time. Will it be Riley's blue and orange food cubes or Kelvin nutrition pills? Bonnie said the nutrition pills, but all of you said the food cubes by 75 to 25%. Never underestimate the love for food geometry. Question 2, let's take a tour of a lost civilization. Would you rather visit planet Sarpedian or planet Charon? Now, this really wasn't a black and white choice, but Bonnie picked Charon. But all of you, history fans, I guess, or maybe just admirers of Miss Marriott Hartley, picked planet Sarpedian by 60 to 40%. Question 3, which of these is your least favorite? The alternative factor or the Omega Glory? Given no good alternatives, Bonnie picked the alternative factor, but all good Yangs and Coms rallied and selected the Omega Glory as the worst of the bunch by 55 to 45%. Question 4, who is the bigger space hustler, Harry Mudd or Cyrano Jones? Bonnie picked the harmless little Cyrano Jones. Most of you seem to agree by 55 to 45 again. And finally, question 5, which is more terrifying, the M113 salt sucker or the Denevan neural back parasites? I must assume that Bonnie was feeling particularly salty that day, and she picked the salt vampire. But in a surprising Twitter twist, the back parasites assumed complete neural control of the Twitter poll at 78 to 22%. So there you go. As always, after each episode drops, I post these questions on Twitter as a poll, so follow me there at Trek Profiles, and you can have your say on this episode's questions. That's it for announcements, news, and weather. M5, let's start the show.
M5 acknowledges.
Her favorite captain is Janeway. Her favorite character is Ro Laren. She's currently working her way through Voyager, and she's originally from the most cheeseful of the states, Wisconsin, and now lives in Southern California, North America Earth, in Sector 001. It's Aly Martinez. Welcome, Aly, and thanks for being on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to talk about my Star Trek experience with you today.
I had to admit I had a little problem when I was writing my little custom intro for you because I wasn't sure if I should refer to you as Aly or the now 23-year-old Trekkie.
Oh, yeah. Well, it started off, I was the teenage Trekkie, so we've come quite a ways since then, I think.
Oh, fantastic. So, Aly, it's time for question 1. Are you a Star Trek fan?
Yes. If you didn't know before, I am a Star Trek fan. It's definitely been a huge part of my life for, since middle school. Blast from the past.
How did you get into Star Trek in middle school?
Well, my parents actually watched it, and one of my earliest memories with my parents is like sitting down each week and watching Enterprise, which was, coming out as I was probably in middle school, the 2000s, something like that. But
yep, thereabouts, yeah.
Yeah, but my parents are also avid Star Trek fans, so they definitely kind of indoctrinated me into the franchise.
And so Enterprise was your first introduction?
Yes, yeah. The first memories of watching Star Trek was when we sat down and watched Broken Bow, because that was, they were so excited. They were just like, okay, well, new Star Trek. Okay, we got to sit down. And we all had like our little pizza and popcorn and everything. And they were just thrilled. And I was just like, oh, what is this? And then here I am now, however many years later. And it's just such a huge part of my life.
So you undoubtedly watched all of Enterprise in first run?
Yes. Yep.
And then what series did you go to next? Did you watch any other parts, or how did you decide to consume more Star Trek after that?
Well, I had also been watching, while Enterprise was going on, I had been watching reruns with my dad, and we mostly Next Generation. That's also like from my childhood, the most heavily influenced, I think. And then with a little bit of DS9 sprinkled in, but I think, with TNG, it was obviously very different than Enterprise. So I almost, in that middle school age, took them as like two entirely different entities. And then only later realizing, oh, well, it is a story and it connects and it all goes together and the puzzle pieces come together in the end.
So as we sit here and record this in 2018, have you seen all 700 and something hours?
I have. And honestly, though, I binge watched a lot of it. When it all came out on Netflix, it was just like, okay, one after the other after the other. And I would say that I'm the least familiar with the animated series and Voyager. And I'm currently working my way back through Voyager right now, but I am trying to sit down and do a full franchise rewatch and really just take it all in, instead of just like, I'm just going to watch them just to get them all, just so I can say I've seen them all. So I really want to sit down and just kind of be a little bit more immersed in it.
I'm doing a Voyager rewatch as we speak, and I really shouldn't even call it a rewatch. I should call it a watch, because Voyager, I know that I've probably only seen about somewhere between 10 to 20% of it in first run or in reruns since. So there's whole episodes that I have no exposure to whatsoever. Where are you in your rewatch?
I am almost in the same place that you are. I'm like right on the edge of season 1, beginning season 2. So it's fun when you've been posting stuff on Twitter. I've been following up on. I'm like, well, I just watched that. Oh, that's so cool that you did that. I'm like, I definitely thought the same thing.
I'm surprised. I didn't think anybody follows these tweets, but I guess people are reading them and they're interested in what I have to say, which I find hilarious. But
oh, absolutely.
For what it's worth, I'm really enjoying Voyager in a way that I honestly find surprising. I wasn't expecting to enjoy it as much as I am. What's been your reaction to it thus far?
I think that now that I'm watching through it and really giving it a little bit more time to sink in, that I am enjoying it a lot more than the first time. I remember Voyager is my dad's favorite series. So after we got through TNG, that was what we watched a lot of. And it was like all over the place, because I'd have stuff going on. So I'd be like, okay, well, I'm watching this episode. And then he would watch another episode that's like 4 seasons later. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? But now that I'm watching it all chronologically, it's really taking some more time to sink in. And I'm really gaining this different perspective on the characters than I had before. Because I remember first time I watched through it, I just like could not stand Neelix at all. I thought he was the most annoying thing ever. But now that I'm watching it through now, I have this deeper appreciation of Neelix. So it's like, wow, that's interesting. when you watch things more than once, it might change your view of it a little bit.
Yeah, I know that Neelix and Kess are not supposed to be favorites, but I'm really enjoying them. And this is something I mentioned last night. My take on it was I like Neelix and I like Kess, but I don't like Neelix and Kess.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it.
They're sort of cringy together. But anyway, I digress. Okay, fantastic. So, and then of course you're all caught up with Discovery and Short Treks, which we're in the middle of as we record this. Is that right?
Yes, I can't wait. It's a few days out from Calypso, and I really did. I was on a Disco Trek, and I really did like Runaway. I was surprised because I thought coming into it that it was going to be more of like a horror, because the trailer kind of made it out to be that way, that it was, oh well, Tilly's in the middle of the mess hall and all this crazy stuff is happening and we don't know what's going on. But I really did like it. Not so much. There were some inconsistencies with, like, I don't know. Well, okay, where did Poe go at the end of the episode, or just little things like that. But I really kind of latched myself onto the relationship between Poe and Tilly, so I did really like it.
Okay, great. So, what's been your reaction to Discovery more broadly?
Starting Discovery, I was not sure. I really the first episode, it wasn't an instantaneous I love this. It was kind of more of a, well, okay. I always try to give everything an equal chance. I'm not going to say anything about it until I watch it. So after watching the first episode, I wasn't sure. And then as the series progressed and they brought in like the Mirror Universe stories, I really did start enjoying it more than I thought I would. I take it into the fact that Discovery is meant to be different than other Star Trek series. And I think that's natural. Star Trek has to evolve over time. So I really, actually, coming out of season 1, really enjoyed it. And I'm looking forward to season 2.
Yeah, which is not that far away as we record this. So we got some stuff to look forward to. I think it's going to be cool.
Yeah, January.
So have you ever been to a convention?
I have been to multiple conventions. The first convention I ever went to was in 2014, and it was Wizard World Chicago. And I wore a Star Trek uniform to it, but I didn't necessarily cosplay. And I had no idea what to expect going in. I had heard things about conventions, but it had never really been a huge part of my life. And then it was like something clicked. It was like, oh, you walk into the hall, the exhibitor hall, and everyone's just decked out in this insane cosplay, and there's hundreds of vendors with a ton of things that you want but you can't afford, and it's just incredible. And since then, gosh, I've went to the San Diego Comic-Con this past year, but didn't actually get badges to go inside. I've tried for 5 years to get badges and have never been chosen, but they have a lot of outside things.
But before we talk about that, I want to learn more about your first convention experience. So I'm not familiar with that particular convention. What was it? Wizard World?
Wizard World, Chicago.
What kind of convention is that? Is it just a general sci-fi fantasy convention, or does it cater to particular genres or fandoms?
No, it's very much very reminiscent of like a normal Comic-Con. It's just not part of the official Comic-Con like lineup. So they call it something different. But it has multiple guests, multiple franchises.
And when you went there, did you go by yourself, or did you go with a group of people? Did you go with your husband or anybody else?
I actually went by myself. My parents they dropped me off at the convention. I tried to talk them into coming with me, but they weren't so sure. So I went. I had just graduated high school, and it was me, just alone at a convention. So it was amazing.
And what about it appealed to you?
I had heard over social media, and I had seen a bunch of friends had said, oh, well, look at this. You would love this. And so I said, oh, what the heck? So I got my tickets, and the togetherness of all the people that are there, you can bond over experiences and bond over your favorite episodes favorite franchises. And then also getting to have this experience with the actual stars or writers or producers where you can sit and listen and talk to them about their inspirations. It's something unlike anything else. You just feel so close to these things, these shows that you love.
So then you had a very different experience at San Diego Comic-Con where you weren't even able to get inside. I mean, that has to be
Yes.
disappointing.
Yeah, I've been bummed that I've never actually gotten an official badge, but honestly, the San Diego Comic-Con was more of the outside events that they had is more of just like, oh, well, you're going to go down and you're going to have a day and you're going to walk around. It's not so much like that intimate experience because there's a million, I mean, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but there's a ton of people there and you don't really get that. I can actually sit down and talk to these people because you're just, you're walking down the street and you're arm to arm with someone else that's trying to get somewhere. And it's enjoyable and the cosplay is amazing. It's just not exactly the same experience as a more intimate convention.
So you fashion yourself a little bit of a cosplayer.
I do. Yeah, I guess a little.
Well, I mean, I've seen you post on Twitter that you have actually full on, quote unquote photo shoots in costumes.
Yeah, actually, I talked my husband into it. He is, I guess, quote unquote, my photographer, and I have another friend that does it for me as well. But I never thought of it, I guess, as cosplay to begin with. I just was like, well, I have this Star Trek uniform, or uniforms now, I guess, and I was like, well, wouldn't it be fun if I just put it on and we went to this, field and I did some fun stuff and pretended to be a Star Trek character?
So is it more like LARPing, if you know the term?
Kind of. Before I do a cosplay photo shoot, I really try to like get into the character, or I guess to the best of my ability. It's hard sometimes, but it's not so much. It's not always all about, oh, we're just gonna have fun and run around. It's like, okay, well, what would this character do if they were here right now?
So you've done Rolaren.
I have. And I've done Jadzia from Trials and Tribulations. And I did that at STLV this year. And if you notice, I didn't have the triple spots, but in the episode, she doesn't have them. So also I've done Lita when the DS9 crew goes to Risa. I did her little beach attire. And Dr. Crusher in her fun workout garb, little jumpsuit thing. And I have more in the works, but I'm not going to really release anything quite yet because they do take a while, and I haven't made all of my costumes. Some of them are bought, but I find that sometimes things take longer than you expect. So it's not always good to say, well, I'm going to have this done by this day because things come up, and sometimes making a costume is harder than you think.
Roger that. What does it do for you?
I think it just restates my love for the characters that I decide to cosplay. And it really it allows me to almost, in a sense, like live through them, because not just am I putting on the costume, I'm trying to almost see things through their eyes. And also, I mean, it's the enjoyment of other people as well, because when I cosplayed at STLV, there were so many people that came up to me and they said, oh my gosh, I can't believe you did this cosplay, or your cosplay looks great, or I'll post something on social media. And at first I was like, I can't believe I'm posting these pictures. This is ridiculous. But then so many people are like, please post more. I love this. It's just that experience of being able to bond with people and also being able to bond in a sense with that character that you're cosplaying.
So this was your first STLV this past year.
It was. I was so excited to go.
How was that experience for you?
It was incredible. I had been following STLV coverage on social media for some time, and it was almost like the convention that I always wanted to go to, but knew that I would never get to, partly because of I didn't always live in San Diego and was that close to Las Vegas, and then also it's expensive, and I wanted to get either a gold or captain's tier or general admission. You know, the different tiers have different things that go along with them, but I really wanted my experience to be a more all-inclusive one if I was going to go at all. So I was really lucky. My husband actually got me my STLV tickets for our anniversary, and it was incredible. Yeah, he had heard me talking about how I wanted to go, and I didn't intend to sound like, oh, I'm so sad I don't get to go to STLV, but he was like, well, I got you your tickets so you can stop complaining now because you get to go. And It was just amazing. I had never been to a convention that was solely Star Trek based. So it was so different than like a normal Comic Con because you're there just for Star Trek and everything is Star Trek and all the vendors have Star Trek things and it was incredible. I cannot say enough. If you've never been to either DST or STLV and you have a chance to go, I would definitely recommend it.
What was the biggest surprise to you coming to the convention for the first time?
I think it was just the magnitude of Star Trek fans that were there. I knew that many Star Trek fans existed, obviously, because I had been interacting with all of you guys through social media. But if you walked into the main hall, well, when you walk into the main hall at STLV and you see how many chairs there are, and not all of them were filled all the time, but
it's about 6,000.
Yeah, something like that. But for some of the larger panels or like the Discovery panels, it was incredible. And then when Patrick Stewart walked out and made the Picard show announcement, like that was incredible. Just like instantaneously, the whole room just rose to their feet and just everyone was so excited. And it just so hard to even describe just this togetherness of fans. It was truly incredible.
Are you going to come back?
I hope so. I'm not so sure about this next year because I may be in the process of moving, so I'm not quite sure yet. But I hope to at least go back to another one before I die. And obviously, I'd like to get to Destination Star Trek as well, but that's a little bit further across the pond.
Gotcha. In your convention experience, what would you say was the highlight of the whole thing?
Of Star Trek Las Vegas or just conventions in general?
Well, maybe both.
I think that the highlight of conventions in general is the chance to actually talk to these people that I've been interacting with over social media. And when you first start talking to someone on social media, you can definitely form a incredible friendship, just even closer than, some of the friendships you may have had before. But then actually getting to see these people in person, to know, they're not like in your computer, but then actually getting to walk up to someone. Or at STLV, I had people walk up to me that knew me just by what I had been posting on social media. They'd come up and say, oh my gosh, hi, Aly. And I was like, this is insane. And something I would have never expected. Because I started posting on social media about Star Trek just because I wanted a place to not annoy my friends and family anymore about Star Trek, because I just wanted something separate. And then from that, it just grew. And now I'm part of this incredible community. And then getting to actually meet these people, it's incredible.
So when you're watching Star Trek in its more recent incarnations, Discovery and all of that, are you watching it yourself? Or are you with a group? Or are you with your spouse? Or how are you consuming it?
I got my husband to watch it with me. He's still a little iffy on Star Trek. I'm pushing him towards it. It was his fault. He decided he wanted to start with Enterprise. And I like Enterprise, but I wouldn't say it's the best series to start with. And I also have another friend that I talked into. So we have the three of us. When Discovery was coming out every week, we would watch it every Sunday and have a little like watch party. And I want to add more people to that number, but we'll see.
Nice. Well, I think it's a great way to watch the show. I think there's something. It's a very community-oriented show in a lot of ways, and I think that it's great to be in a watch party. I don't have that experience. I'm always just watching it by myself, so I'm always interested to see how people are consuming it, because I think it changes a little bit about how you interpret the episodes. So, are you having like a discussion about it afterwards, or still trying to, having your predictions about what's going to happen next and all that? I'm sure.
Yeah, we are. And I definitely agree with you on that because, like I said, my husband has not had as much exposure to Star Trek as I have. So it's really interesting to watch Star Trek with him. Coming from me, who's, I've seen it all. I honestly I'm not an encyclopedia of Star Trek. I will profess to that. I've watched it, but I'm not like, oh, well, this happened on this date and this star date and this ship, and I can't go that in depth, but seeing his reactions and his perspectives on it compared to mine as someone who's seen it and then who's coming completely new into it, it's so cool. It's just, Oh, I don't know if I would have thought about it that way, but that's interesting.
So you've mentioned that you've got some uniforms and some other Trek-related items. What's your favorite item in your collection?
Ooh, I actually just at this past weekend I went to the Los Angeles Comic Con only for one day. But while I was there, I picked up a Play Arts Kai Captain Kirk figure, and I had been wanting that figure for a long time. I had seen it at comic book shops. I had looked it up online and on Amazon, and every time that I wanted to buy it, I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't. So while I was at the Los Angeles Comic Con, I was like, I am just gonna get it because I wanted it for so long. And now it's sitting on my desk, and I'm debating whether or not to take it out of the box. But I guess as of yet, that would be my favorite piece of memorabilia. But other than that, I have a few autographs that I treasure highly as well.
Which ones?
I got one this year at WonderCon in Anaheim from Nichelle Nichols, and she is just the most gracious person I think you'll ever meet. She is so humble, and I was wearing my costume. It wasn't a TN or it wasn't a TOS costume, but she's like, "Oh my gosh, that's a Next Generation costume." And she's like, "Oh, well, come over here. What's your name? Let me sign this for you." And it was just amazing. And then also this at STLV this year from the Trekkie girls, I got Neelix. I can't even think of his name right now. Who plays Neelix?
Ethan Phillips.
Ethan Phillips, yes. And then I also got a Dr. McCoy from Beyond. I'm blanking on names right now.
Which one?
Dr. McCoy from Beyond.
Oh, Urban.
He's from Lord of the Rings and stuff too. But my names are escaping me today. But yeah, those two I treasure pretty highly as well. And I think the one thing I'll always regret is that I didn't have the chance to meet Leonard Nimoy before he passed away. And that's something that I think I will always regret. But talking with other people about their experiences meeting him, it just sounds like he was one of the most amazing people.
One of my earliest Star Trek memories actually was being at the convention in New York City, and I was probably a freshman or sophomore in high school, and my mom wouldn't let me go in the city by myself. So she took me, even though she really didn't have that much of an interest in Star Trek. I mean, she watched it when it was originally on in the 60s. But anyway, one of my earliest memories was sitting at the Penta Hotel and listening to Leonard Nimoy actually reciting poetry from the stage. He was big into poetry at the time. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, something else. It's a treasured memory for sure.
Oh my gosh. That just, like I said, from anyone that I've talked to that has met him before or had been in a panel with him or had been in the same room, it's just, that's where I'm like, oh man, I wish that I would have had the chance. But I mean, his memory lives on. So at least there's that.
So before we began recording, I let you know that my episodes typically marinate a little bit on my computer before they come out, so that the timing of when this episode comes out will be somewhere in the nebulous medium-term future. So by the time this comes out, there'll probably be some news about a podcast that you're going to be doing for Tricorder. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah, that's exciting. Well, a few weeks ago, I had done some podcasting on both Disco Trek and Weekly Trek, and one of the Tricorder hosts, Shashank Avaru from Politrex, we had been talking, and he suggested that we do a podcast together. And I had been wanting to do a podcast for a long time, but I wasn't exactly sure how I would go about it or what I wanted it to be about. But Shashank and I put our brains together, and we came up with a podcast idea that we pitched to Tricorder, and it's called Who is Trek? And it's a little bit of a deep dive on Star Trek characters, about not just about where they were born or, where we saw them in episodes, but also their motivations, what makes them tick, what about ourselves can we see in them. So I think it's going to be great, and I'm sure by this time we'll have really gotten rolling on it, but I'm thrilled to be working with Tricorder and also to be podcasting, finally.
I think it's wonderful, and on behalf of Tricorder, you're most welcome to be amongst us for sure. But the question I want to ask you is, it's one thing to be a Star Trek fan. It's another thing to be a passionate Star Trek fan. But then there are fans like yourself, and maybe I'm even included in this, I'm not sure, but you have this desire to not only enjoy Trek, but also to publicly share it in a very prolific way. In your case, through the photos that you're doing, you're very active Star Trek Twitter, you're going to conventions, and now you're podcasting about it. What is this compulsion that you have to actually share Trek publicly, and why is that important to you?
That's funny that you asked that, because if you've ever followed me on social media, I do these fun little things called Towel Talk Tuesdays. On Tuesdays, it's a small video just where I talk about some thoughts that's on my mind. And this will be irrelevant when this podcast comes out, but this past week, as we're recording this, I talked a little bit about that on my Towel Talk Tuesday. And part of the reason why I do what I do is because of the interactions that I've made, people that I've met over social media, but also because it took me so long to find that voice that I wanted to share. Because I was nervous at first, because social media is very public, and if you say the wrong thing, you can get a lot of backlash for it. And I was nervous. I wanted to share my opinions about Star Trek, but also I thought maybe, well, at the time I was only 18. I thought, well, I'm only 18. I don't know enough. I haven't been in the game long enough, even though I've seen it all. And I came to a point where I realized that that voice that was in the back of my head saying that you should do this, it was something that I didn't just want to share. It was something that I needed to share. Because every time that I did, I would have so many other people respond and say, oh, I thought the exact same thing, or what you said really made a difference to me and it made me want to share my opinions as well, because I saw you doing it. And now I'm no longer afraid, because I saw you doing it, and you gave me the courage to do it as well. And hearing people say that to me, it just like almost brings me to tears, because I never thought that's what my Star Trek social media would be. I thought, oh, I'm just going to share my Star Trek. Like, it's just a place for me to share my Star Trek. And then for that to evolve into something so special, it's the most amazing feeling. Like, I'm going to tear up talking about it.
It's okay. Tears are allowed on the Trek Profiles podcast. We're an accommodating place, and your host is a snag, a sensitive new age guy, so it's all good. Sorry. Okay.
No, you're good.
I whenever I have an opportunity to make fun of myself, I take it. It's like I can't resist it. It's like the allure of self mockery is just too strong.
Oh.
But I think that there is something to what you're talking about, Aly, in that there's something about this particular fandom, which, while it certainly does have its darker parts, there's something about this fandom which is very communally oriented and very much about the connection that people have. And I think that that's inherent in the show, is that, that we're all connected, right? And it's not just the humans, it's the humans, it's the Andorians, it's the Vulcans, and even the Klingons and the Romulans, right? Is that when we realize that we're all connected to one another, we're better. And there's something in this fandom that's the same sort of way, and I haven't been able to describe it, but I have this inchoate sense that it's like this bonding we have over Star Trek is really quite special. And in some other fandoms that I'm involved in, you don't kind of see the same thing. In some other fandoms, there tends to be a lot of vitriol about particular things, that if you're not a fan in the exact same way that I'm a fan and have, the exact same rankings of these things that I do, then you're not a fan. And there's some of that in Star Trek, but certainly not to the levels that we've seen somewhere else. And have you experienced some of that negativity? I certainly hope not.
I've tried my best to kind of stay out of that. And I mean, it's not even that I wanted to get into it, because people are nasty on social media sometimes. But a few weeks ago, I did have someone, they kind of misinterpreted what I was trying to get across. I posted something on Twitter about me wearing my Star Trek uniform and how it made me feel empowered as a woman. And out of that, someone, I don't even remember his name, but took that in a way as I was mocking the military by saying that I was wearing my uniform, which is the way other end of the spectrum for me. I mean, obviously my husband's in the military and I am also a part of a Gold Star family, so that was not my intention at all. But it goes to show that things can be misinterpreted over social media because you don't know the tone that someone is saying something in, or it kind of offers that anonymity where, okay, well, here's my profile, but if I say something nasty or mean to you, you have no way of actually getting to me. I can just block you. So there are people like that. And I think that you'll find them anywhere. I mean, you find them in real life too.
Yeah.
Not just on social media.
It's part of being in the world, for sure. One of the stranger things I've experienced is when sometimes when doing this show, my guests will say controversial things and I'll get attacked for that. And I think, well, why don't you go talk to them?
Oh.
Right? And their point was, well, you either shouldn't have had them on, so you should gatekeep your show better. I've gotten that one because this person isn't the kind of fan that I am, and that's your fault somehow talking to me, or I should somehow edit out anything that's not utterly, totally 100% positive, and that's just not how I choose to roll. So
yeah, I think also I think that there's something to say about the fact that it's okay. Some people need to understand this, but it's okay if someone disagrees with you on social media. But if they're being extremely negative and attacking you, that's a different story. Because I'm totally okay with different opinions about things. Even if it's like something I totally don't believe, that's fine. That's what you believe. But if you're attacking me for my beliefs, that's a different story.
Okay, well, the M5 has given me a list of episodes, and I think we should jump into that. What do you say?
Yeah, why not? Let's do it.
So I want to start, by talking about The Cage. Now,
okay.
I'm not sure how you feel about The Cage as a standalone episode, or if we should talk about it in terms of the context of the menagerie. So let's start there. Do you want to talk about the menagerie or The Cage?
Let's go with The Cage. Let's do it.
So tell me why the M5 thinks that this is an episode that's important to you.
Okay, so The Cage is obviously, if you know me, I've talked multiple times about how The Cage is one of my favorite episodes. And it is that way because I do appreciate that standalone feel. It's almost like a longer version of a short trek, if you think about it. Number one is one of my favorite characters. So off the bat, seeing her was what drew me to it. And also, Captain Pike is one of my favorite characters as well. And I loved when I saw him show up in JJ's new Star Trek series. So I think it should have aired. But I love William Shatner and Captain Kirk as well. I don't know. Do you think it would have been successful if it would have ever aired?
I think it's always hard to write these alternative histories, but
That's true.
I will say that some of the things I really appreciated about The Cage is the fact that the captain was just tired, and you got a sense that he really was like a tortured kind of guy, and I liked that. And it was such a contrast. I think when we got Kirk, who was like this totally self-assured dude, And Pike was like, oh, I'm tired of having 203 people's lives, in my hands. I'm tired of deciding who lives and who dies. And, he's having that conversation with the doctor in his quarters. And I just thought that conversation that he has with Boyce right there, it really encapsulated to me like what the flavor of that show could have been. And the idea that, that I think Star Trek has gotten away from, which is sad to me, is that space is big. In a way that like is beyond incomprehensible to us. I talked about this on the episode that I did with Dr. Aaron, the astrophysicist, right? I mean, it's just the space is so big, we can't even get our brains wrapped around it. And you got this sense that he really was out there, that he just couldn't like pick up the phone and dial up Admiral and say, what am I supposed to be doing? Or what do you want me to do here? And he really was, left to his own devices and making decisions that could have potentially catastrophic outcomes. And there really was no help is going to come for a long time. And that sense of really being out there, I found really appealing. And I wish we had more of that in Star Trek. We seem to have less of it nowadays. And I want more of that.
Yeah, I hear you. One of my favorite things about seeing in Star Trek captains, I love it when, you feel like you're on the same high that they are when I can't remember the episode now, but when Captain Picard, when his archaeology professor gives him that, it's like this crazy artifact, and he's so excited and thrilled.
Oh, and it has all the parts, all the pieces in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you see him just like light up, and I love that with other captains as well. But part of the endearing part for me about seeing a captain is when you do see their hardships, or it's like if you're watching the Amelia Earhart Voyager episode where Janeway's like, well, it would be great if the crew could stay on this planet. They would be able to live out their lives, but I can't make that choice for them. And you see their internal struggles, and that's what you're seeing with Pike. Like you said, he's just exhausted. He's done playing God for them,
I saw that episode in my rewatch, and I got in trouble with people on Twitter for my response to it, which was that there would have been some non-zero number of people on the ship who would have wanted to stay.
I agree. I think there would have been a few. What had they been out there? Would they say 6 months? Something like that?
Yeah.
They've been in the Delta Quadrant? I don't think that's a long enough time for that, like, I definitely need to stay here bond. So I hear what you're saying.
People got agitated with me, but my point was that I'm sure that there had to have at least been a couple people who maybe didn't have anyone at home, didn't necessarily have a life to go back to in the Alpha Quadrant. So that's in our world today, right? There were people like that, right? Who were, on their own, albeit some temporarily. And they might say, hey, this looks like a great place to live. Sitting on a ship to go back, for 70 years to some other place where I don't really have anything all that exciting going on. This might be a good place for me. Right? I just didn't see not anybody wanting to stay, but I get it. They wanted to make it a moment, but it just didn't ring true for me. Just knowing people. But apparently a lot of fans on Twitter disagreed with me on that.
That's okay. Disagreement is good.
Yeah, as long as they're respectful, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, I have some, how do I want to describe it? Out and proud gatekeepers that I interact with on Twitter from time to time. And as long as they don't bring any negativity to me, I don't mind it. But, as long as they're respectful, it's fine. It's just when people get negative and they start spewing some hate, I'm not the right kind of fan or this or that. That's the kind of stuff I can't abide. But I think it's okay to have different opinions, and everybody has their own opinions about which Trek is best anyway. So that's a
that's true.
And in this case, we're looking at the cage and we're saying, man, that could have been the best Trek.
Yeah. So I think that the cage almost that, well, space is a scary place and things don't always turn out like they should, almost is bringing about the renewed interest in the Quentin Tarantino. Space is crazy and things are really dangerous. And I wasn't sure about, hearing Quentin Tarantino, he wants to do a Star Trek movie. I was like, oh, are you sure? But I'm willing to keep an open mind. So I think I like those, space has great things and great, you have first contact with species and all these incredible technologies, but also it is not happy-go-lucky all the time.
One of the things I really appreciate about the motion picture, which is a movie that I've only grown more fondly attached to over time, is that it was one of the few times in Star Trek we actually got to appreciate the fact that just running the ship is hard. Getting it into warp drive and, getting transporters to work. I mean, this, I don't care what kind of, mumbo jumbo technology you have, the more advanced it is, it has to be more complicated. And just the idea that, going faster than light with these engines and having intermixed chambers and, all the crazy technology stuff. I mean, it gave you a sense that it actually was an achievement to make these things happen. It wasn't just like, I pop in a shuttle, hit a button and, pew, pew, I'm off to the other end of the universe. I really appreciated that. And I liked that sense of achievement that the characters get from those things in a way that I think is something that, as Star Trek has gone on, we've gotten less of. It's something that I really appreciated in The Cage and in TMP. And I'm not sure we've seen a lot of that in a lot of the other incarnations of Trek.
Yeah, I wonder if the new animated series, I mean, it's meant to be a comedy, but I wonder if Lower Decks will, I guess, in a comedic way, elaborate on that at all.
I was that guy. I was the Lower Decks guy. I mean, I will never forget, we're going to have a diversion here, but I was on a submarine and we had these electrostatic precipitators, which were used to clean the air by sending the air through these gigantic boxes that had these charged electrostatic plates in them. And it would pull impurities out of the air. And then we had to clean them in a sonic sink. And it was like this bone-jarring experience. These things were heavy, and you had to lie on your back on a piece of equipment, like half upside down, and pull these things that were like the size of 3 shoeboxes put together that were heavy, and pull like 20 of them out of this piece of equipment, and then carry them all the way across the ship by hand, put them into this sink for a certain period of time, which ultrasonically cleaned the plates, and then reverse the process and put it all back together, right? And we used to not have smoking on the submarine, and then they allowed smoking. And the work that I had to do to clean those freaking plates, right? Because it had to pull all the contaminants from the cigarette. And I never smoked, so I had total ability to just rag on people for this, like, why are you're making my life so hard by doing what you're doing, And just like, I have a million stories about that. Just running a piece of equipment, like any ship, is hard. And there has to be like these little cogs in the wheels, like I was, keeping everything running. And so I always appreciate that perspective very much. I'm reminded of another show. I think I probably mention it at least once every episode, Babylon 5. And I don't know if you ever saw it.
Yes. I've seen bits and pieces. I haven't seen all of it.
Well, they have a Lower Decks type episode where they got these 2 like cleaning maintenance guys. And it's all from their perspective. And they're like sitting there having lunch. They're like, what'd you get for lunch? And they're talking about what they brought. And these are like regular working class dudes. And there's some like space battle all of a sudden. And they're like, why are we in this space battle? They're like, I don't know. Who are we fighting? I don't know. And, they don't have any idea of like, and you just got the sense that there's this gigantic mission that's happening. And like, there's some kind of life or death struggle going on. And their only job is to like hook up the circuit and clean the deck and, make sure the escape pods are all online. But they have no idea what's happening. And that right there just was so true to life to me. I love that so much. And I hope they bring that in. I think that'd be really fun to see a whole. I think there's a lot of rich comedy that they could explore in that sort of vein. I think it'll be hilarious. Yeah,
I agree. That's so fun that you kind of have that personal connection there.
It is. But I'll say that it also drives me crazy. It drives me crazy because sometimes when I see stuff, I'm like, I don't think that's how that would go. Like here's an example, right? Mm-hmm. So, you were talking about Runaway. And one of the problems I had with it was that I just cannot believe that Tilly will not get caught. Because I know, I absolutely believe that she has to be found out, that she was harboring. I can't believe she kept a fugitive on the ship and was not caught. And if she is caught, that's getting kicked out of Starfleet or a career-ending reprimand. And I don't want to see that happen to Tilly. But if nothing ever happens with that, I don't believe it, because I just know how ships work. And forget the military. Think about a freighter today. Like, what are those? If they caught a stowaway, and you tried to keep it, you tried to not let anybody know about the stowaway, and you were found out, you would be fired and you would probably go to jail or something. I mean, something bad would happen to you. And that's like in the civilian world. In Star Trek world, especially when the stowaway is like someone who the Federation is after and has like an APB out, that'd be the end of you.
Yeah. So I hear you. I think that it was almost a fault in writing there, because the true like point of the short trek was the relationship between Poe and Tilly, and then those kind of idiosyncrasies on the side. I do understand what you're saying, that it did kind of draw you out of it a little bit.
Yeah, and that was just my own reaction. And I do appreciate the acting and the relationship between the 2 actors. I thought was great. I thought the performances were just wonderful, and it's very clear that Mary Wiseman is a comedic acting deity in her own right. So lots of appreciation and love for that. But this is just my own thing. So when I watch these shows,
Yeah.
knowing just a little bit about how ships work and things like that, that's the kind of stuff. So that's the thing that weighs me down
Hmm.
when I watch these shows, and that's true not just for Star Trek but for everything. So but that's my own insanity. But enough about me. We're here to talk about you. So, Kate, why did you have this affinity for number one?
I think obviously a very plain answer for that would be that it was very new for its time. It was just completely having a woman on the bridge. I mean, you even hear Captain Pike say like, "Oh, I can't get used to having women on the bridge, but not you, number one, you're different." So, first of all, that's like the flashing red light. That's like, that's awesome. Woman on the bridge, woman power. Yay. But also, I think that just the way that she carries herself, and obviously we're going to get to see more of her in Discovery. Whoop whoop. I think it really is just her affinity for seeing her take charge. I think that's why I like Voyager so much as well. Like with Janeway, I love seeing women take charge, but also knowing that they are allowed to have a soft side as well. They don't just have to be, rigid and I am the captain or I am number one, but they can also have that softer side.
I think that's one of the things I'm appreciating about Voyager since you bring it up. And, for my work, for my day job, I actually do organizational psychology, leadership development, corporate training, that sort of stuff. And so I always pay close attention to leadership styles and things like that because it's what I do for a living. And Janeway, in my opinion, probably is the most emotionally intelligent of any of the captains that we've seen in Star Trek by a lot. And you can lump in Discovery with that, doesn't matter. She's way ahead of where any of the other captains were. Picard kept himself completely aloof from the crew on purpose. He wanted to be elevated above and sort of, this distant, lofty, sort of intellectual dude and not be involved with the crew on a very personal level. Kirk sort of had his troika around him of Spock and McCoy, and everybody else was like off in the distance. Avery Brooks, in his portrayal of Sisko, I think was very similar in that he was distant in a way. He wasn't really connected, but I see that Janeway was very interested in like how the crew is feeling, what they're thinking about, whether they're performing well, and sort of their emotional health was very important to her. And she seems to me to be one of the most perceptive and inspiring, I think, leaders in Star Trek so far, anyway. Where I am at the middle of season 2, so I think she's fantastic. So looking forward to seeing how she develops over the course of the season, and maybe that'll change. I don't know, but right now I'm loving what I'm seeing.
Yeah, that's why part of the reason I'm obviously thrilled that number one is coming back in season 2 of Discovery. I don't know how much we'll get of her. Nothing has really been announced yet, but from only seeing her in this one episode, it would be nice to have her character develop a little bit. I know she's referenced in some of the novels, and I honestly have not followed up on the novels as close as I should. So I've heard that she's been developed a little bit more on that side, but I hope we'll see a little bit more of her and get to see her kind of blossom a little bit on screen.
It's no spoiler to say that in one of the Discovery books that she ends up working with Saru on something. And Saru just goes like deeply head over hooves for her in like a very, in a very internal way. I don't think he takes any action on it now. I'm trying to remember. I don't think he actually does anything, but in his head, he is like totally taken with her in like a very deep way. And I think it's part of that opposites attract. She's very bold. She doesn't have that fear that he has. So I think that was probably quite an allure for him. Okay. Let's talk about an episode you'd mentioned earlier, Broken Bow, the extended first episode of Enterprise. Certainly a very different premiere than The Cage in a lot of ways. A lot of on location, it's a lot more quote unquote primitive Earth than we see in future Star Trek. Tell me why this episode is particularly meaningful to you.
Well, first of all, like I said earlier, it's the very first Star Trek episode that I can distinctly remember watching because, like I said, my parents were so excited for it to premiere. And I actually, at the time, I do have a love for Enterprise, but I will admit that it is not my favorite series. And that's okay. That's just my opinion. But I do like that it kind of opens up and you get to see that young Jonathan Archer, that kid and his dad obviously developing the Warp 5 engine. And it's interesting because it has all these like pieces that I think one of the things with Enterprise with me, because it was only 4 seasons and it didn't really have the time to develop like some of the other Star Trek that we have seen, I think that there were definitely loose ends, and I think a lot of people could attest to that as well. But just opening up with Broken Bow, you see Archer's obvious distaste for the Vulcans, which changes as the series goes on because of his experiences with Paul.
And which is also mutual, I would add. It appears to me.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you see, I like that you see this, oh, he goes to Brazil to get Hoshi, and like you see these people coming together, and it's before the ship launches. I like that, oh, well, it's coming, but it hasn't happened yet. And then, I mean, there's obvious a point where it's like, well, is this going to happen? Are they going to go on this mission? And coming like from middle school me, seeing this, well, actually, when when Broken Bow did premiere, I would have been, 6, 7? I wouldn't have been in middle school yet, but this is the first episode I remember watching until I got back into it in middle school. So me, like 6-year-old me watching this, which my parents were kind of iffy because there's like some suggestive content in Enterprise that maybe
the premiere date was September 2001.
Okay, so yeah, I would have been 7, yeah, 6, 7, something like that.
And only a few weeks after 9/11.
Yeah, I remember someone was talking about that on Twitter recently. But my parents were like, okay, well, maybe she can watch it because hopefully there won't be anything too suggestive. And if there is, we'll just cover her eyes or ask her to leave the room or something. But coming from me, these characters, as I watched Enterprise so many years later in middle school when I really went through and just deep dove into it, those characters were so much more endearing for me because it was just that flashback to 6-year-old me sitting in the living room watching this for the first time. And I'm like, oh, I remember that. So each time I watch Broken Bow, it's just that like flashback. I'm like, oh, well, that is just such a blast from the past. And then it just truly sheds a light on how much Star Trek is a part of my life.
It certainly was a very different kind of pilot than a lot of the other Star Treks that we've seen. And I think it had a real sense of exploration in it, which I thought was quite endearing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also right away, it's like, okay, well, the Suliban, like, what is happening? What's going on? And then you're left with all these questions in the end. So and then you have to, as you go on, you discover answers to those questions instead of it had that episodic feel, but also had that like overarching story arc with like obviously the temporal Cold War and all that stuff that Discovery is doing so differently because they do one long story per season rather than more of like an episodic feel.
How did you like the temporal Cold War stuff?
When I first watched it when I was little, it obviously confused the crap out of me because I had no idea what was going on. But I think it's interesting. I think that it can be hard to follow. Star Trek Online has kind of established a little bit more on it, and as I've been playing, it's interesting because I mean it's not necessarily canon, but I think it's fascinating, but also it was a little hard to follow. I don't know. How do you feel?
I felt like it wasn't fully fleshed out in a way. Now, my memory fades, so I'm actually thinking back to when it was in first run, because that was probably the last time I saw the whole thing was in first run broadcast. So we're talking quite a number of years ago now. So I'm going to have to ask me after I finish my rewatch. So I'll probably have more to say than I do right now. But I just remembered not feeling at the time like it was as rich of a story as I wanted it to be.
Yeah, I do hear you there. And I think whatever qualms that that people do have with it, it was also trying to do the same thing for its time that Discovery is trying to do now. It was trying to obviously bring it back, but also kind of continue that evolution in a way where it's like, okay, well, this is still Star Trek, but we're in the 2000s now, so this is 2000 Star Trek is different than TOS or DS9 or etc. So I think in a way it was really just trying to be that next step in the evolution, but then there were so many loose ends for Enterprise. I definitely agree with you there.
Let's turn back time. It's a little pun there. And let's take a look at a TOS episode, City on the Edge of Forever.
Oh my gosh, I love this episode so much.
Why?
It's heartbreaking. It highlights, well, okay, they do all these amazing things on the Enterprise, but also just this interaction that Kirk and Spock and McCoy all had on this 1930s Earth really left such an impact on them. With Edith Keeler, I mean, gosh, watching the end of it when Kirk just has to let her die, that's just like, it just tugs at your heartstrings so much. And then obviously the introduction of the Guardian of Forever too. So it has all of the right ingredients for an amazing Star Trek episode.
What I find so wonderful about it is that it's so not a typical sci-fi show. It's not about spaceships and alien craziness and death and destruction. It's really just it's a time travel episode for sure, but it's not really about any of that, right? It's about these very human emotions, and it's really quite lovely. I have one regret about City on the Edge, which is it's a personal regret. It's not something that I think I can fault the show for, but it's that when they were making this show in the 60s, they, as we've already talked about, they didn't really do these long story arcs. This would have been an episode that I think Kirk would have been dealing with the aftermath of this for quite a long time. And I feel like that was a key that was unturned. You know, it would have been really something special to see him deal with the death of Edith Keeler over a series of episodes afterwards. You know, and I realize that's just not how they made any TV in the day, but it's something I think about as I watch the episode. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I do agree with that. And I think that's interesting that you touch on that, because the JJ verse or the Kelvin timeline, you see in Beyond that Kirk is struggling with the death of his father and trying to live up to his father's memory. And I liked that about Beyond. And that's where I hear you out with this, because yes, Kirk is a starship captain and needs to pick himself back up after this, but there would have been definitely lasting effects. It wouldn't have just gone away right away. It would have been nice to see him, maybe sit down with McCoy and talk about it, just like as a little sprinkle in a different episode. So I hear you there.
Borg. Hugh.
Oh, yes.
Topological anomalies. Viruses. Tell me, why is this an episode the M5 says I should ask you about?
This also connects with me on a deep emotional level, because obviously when the episode first starts off and they find Hugh, well, he's not Hugh yet, and Worf just says, well, just kill it. Or Captain Picard says, well, we're not going to do anything. Obviously after his experiences with the Borg already. And you really just, as you find out that it is not just a drone, that you figure out that it is Hugh, it's just this amazing just development of someone as a Borg. You would have thought, well, you already know what the Borg are capable of. How can this be a person? And then he becomes Hugh. And then you have this love that you just have for him. And then in the end, when he essentially not necessarily sacrifices himself, but in the end, he makes the decision, well, I will go back because I want to protect the Enterprise or Geordi. And you just see this drone, this machine, become a person. And that is the most incredible thing.
So what's interesting to me about this episode is that it comes after Best of Both Worlds.
Mm-hmm.
Picard is very well aware of how the Borg are, but yet chronologically it comes before First Contact. And I'm wondering how Picard's reactions in this episode would have changed if he'd had that First Contact experience, if they would have taken the same actions.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess I've never thought about it that way.
Because
that's a good question.
This is the kind of stuff I think that when you binge a show, we've talked about this on the podcast in the past. When you binge a show, you're watching it, one episode after another without any breathing room. And, when these episodes first came on, and even not in first run, but even in syndication, you turn on, some cable channel 345 and catch some random episode of Star Trek, and it's fine to just watch an episode. But when you binge it, even though they didn't necessarily mean to serialize the show, I think we kind of interpret it in a more serialized way when we binge it. And so when I was doing my TNG rewatch a couple of years ago, and I thought, I don't know, after Best of Both Worlds, I can't see Picard just being like, yeah, we got to let him go. It's, that's not a good idea. And then when you stick First Contact in there and you see how he feels about the Borg in there, you think, is this the same guy?
Yeah. Yeah. Also with that, you see with Guinan, obviously, normally her nature where she's in 10 forward and will talk with you about your problems, and then you see her reluctance with Hugh, and just instead of this good-natured Guinan, you see obviously what happened to the Elorians with the Borg. That's part of her reasoning, or the majority of her reasoning for the way that she feels. But it's definitely kind of a flip-flop there too, because usually Guinan will sit down and she knows she'll talk with you, and then she wants nothing to do with you.
The face of the enemy, Troy as a Romulan, Starfleet defector to Sev. Tell me why this episode matters to you.
This is obviously one of my favorite episodes, but if not my very favorite Troy episode. And I think that she really grows as a character here, even though she's not Deanna Troi in this episode. I think, first of all, consider yourself in her shoes. So you just randomly wake up and you're now a Romulan, and you're given these orders to try to protect these defectors, and you have to make it work. Imagine what you yourself would do in that position. I would honestly have crumbled under the pressure, I think. But obviously she's confused, but she just goes for it. And it works.
I loved the episode. I completely loved all the acting, and in the most delightful possible way, between her and the captain of the ship and their little power games. And like when they were trying to eat their meal, have you tried this? And why are you eating that? And I loved every possible thing about it in the most delightful way imaginable.
Obviously she has to get away with it, and she knows that she has to get away with it, but just her quick thinking on her feet too. I would not have been able to just off the top of my head been able to make that work. And she just was like, okay, well, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to have that tone that I need to have to prove that I am from the Tal Shiar. And it's just, wow. The acting, like you said, very much just incredible.
I think being an empath certainly helped quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you're going to be a spy and you can see how other people are feeling while you're talking to them, man, that's got to be a powerful weapon.
Yeah, that is a good point that you make. And also, I mean, to hope in the end that it would all work out with attacking the Enterprise, hopefully they'll realize that it's me. And then obviously we see that it does work out in the end, but she doesn't show really any unsurety there. She knows what she has to do and she does it.
So a couple of weekends ago, I was at a sci-fi meetup and I brought my podcasting equipment and I recorded a whole bunch of Star Trek fans in these like mini Trek Profiles interviews. And as we record this, I've already released the first one and the second one's almost ready to go. And one of the questions I asked people that I just kind of hit on in the moment, I really enjoyed this question. So I'm going to ask you,
Okay.
Imagine that I'm a friend of yours and I've never seen Star Trek at all. And I know nothing about Star Trek whatsoever, except that you know a lot about it. And I call you up and I say, hey, Aly, I'm at the airport. I'm getting on a plane in 10 minutes. I can download one episode of Star Trek to watch on the plane before I go. What episode should I download and watch?
In the Pale Moonlight.
Get out.
And this is, yeah, I know. Strange, right? Because obviously it's like, okay, well, there's a lot of stuff that's going on. But I think that actually, I've suggested this to people before. I think that In the Pale Moonlight has a ton of qualities that are so special of what Star Trek does. First of all, you see that the Federation is in war. So that's something, okay, well, it's not necessarily a peaceful time, right?
Yep.
And then we also see Sisko obviously having this crazy internal almost war with himself about what he should do. You see it through his log throughout the entire episode. And that, I mean, obviously shows that, well, he has reserves about what he needs to do. And obviously what he's doing is not acceptable in a Federation sense. And then also you see Garak, which I love Garak. And in the end, you see that Garak makes this decision that obviously Sisko would not have made. And that Garak just is willing to do whatever it takes. So you have Sisko, who's like, well, okay, I'm not sure if I should do this, but it needs to be done. And then you have Garak, who's like, I am just going to do whatever it takes because he's Garak. And then you have all these other just like elements that just sneak their way in with, okay, so Quark gets stabbed. And then all this stuff with, okay, well, Quark wants to press charges. And it just has all these beautiful elements that in the end, you see this insane thing happen. And okay, well, how did we get there? And this is how it happened. I love that it's almost that chronological. Well, I'm not Sisko's log. Well, I'm not sure how I should do this, but I consulted with Mr. Garak. And then in the end, you see what happened. So it really just tells that story in such a wonderful way. I don't know if it's the one that you would have chosen, but...
Well, I'm surprised, I have to admit, not because it's in any way not a good episode. It's not a criticism of the episode in any way. But in my way of thinking, I'll be curious to see what other people think too, is that I think it's several standard deviations away from, I think, what best encapsulates whatever Star Trek is. It's probably the most different kind of episode that we have in a lot of ways. It's very different. It's very different. And so I think that it's an interesting choice. Certainly not what I would have picked. But again, I'm not saying it's a bad episode in any way. It's a great episode. It's just, I'm not sure I would show that one episode to someone and say, yeah, if you like this, you're going to like Star Trek.
That's true. Well, I think I'm coming from the perspective on the question where if it was one of my friends that I know. So maybe I'm coming at it from this is what my friends would like.
Okay.
Rather than a more like unbiased opinion about it.
That's fair.
Maybe that's where I'm coming from.
That's fair. I mean, I know I was putting you on the spot, but it's a fun thought experiment to have, right? And
yes.
I enjoyed hearing the different things that people told me. It was quite an interesting collection of responses I got to that question. But I think that the answer to this question is driven by a deeper thought, which is, what do you think Star Trek is, Aly?
Oh gosh. Star Trek is really altogether an idea or a possible future for humanity. And it has all these lovely bits that we see, the the embracing of diversity. We see obviously the increase in technology, use of diplomacy, and sometimes conflict when there needs to be conflict. And we also see into these beautiful cultures, these beautiful traditions. And it really highlights the importance of humanity evolving, not just in the future, but how in the past it became the future, and now in the present, how important it really is that it needs to happen. It really just is that hopeful future of humanity stepping up and embracing everything that makes it so beautiful.
Why does it matter to you?
I think because Star Trek has always been this almost consistent presence in my life, it really has made me a better person. And that sounds kind of cheesy to say, but it has taught me how to be a better human. It has taught me to be more patient with people. It has taught me to be compassionate. It has taught me to be stubborn when I need to be. Like I said, Ro Laren is my favorite character, so she definitely harbors a lot of stubbornness. It just...
Could you give me an example?
Yeah, I can. Okay, so growing up, Star Trek was something that I always aspired to because of the fact that growing up, I wanted to be an astronaut. That was like my number one, this is what I'm going to be when I grow up. You can ask any of my friends, like any of my close friends, they'd say, well, yeah, Aly talked about being an astronaut all the time. She wouldn't shut up about it.
We'll believe you.
And now I realized growing up that I didn't really have that knack for STEM. I was never gifted in science or mathematics. I had tutors, I studied. It wasn't my bag. And so through Star Trek, I was able to kind of experience that I guess that science and math and space exploration that I wanted, but that I could never really achieve. Not that it would be impossible, but I just realized I was gifted in different ways. And just that connection that I had just made me so much more deeply appreciate the franchise as a whole.
I think that that's a beautiful and inspiring way to bring the interview portion of this show to a close. Because, Aly, I've enjoyed talking to you, but I have to tell you that the M5 is furiously signaling me that it is time for the Kobayashi Maru.
Oh, gosh. Okay. I'm nervous.
Don't be nervous. The Kobayashi Maru is a challenging and difficult test, cunningly prepared by the M5. Should you not only survive the test, but pass it as well, the M5 will award you an honorary Star Trek title. Are you ready, Aly?
Okay, I'm ready.
M5, load the Kobayashi Maru simulation and prepare to record Aly's responses.
The simulation is ready.
Question 1. In your next life, you will be reborn as a Star Trek alien. You can choose Andorian or Vulcan. What's it going to be?
Vulcan.
Time for lunch. Plomeek soup a la Neelix or omelets a la Riker?
Plomeek soup a la Neelix.
Worst possible Star Trek punishment. A month in the agonizer like in the Mirror Universe, or 20 years of implanted prison memories like from the Agrathi?
20 years of implanted prison memories.
Who is the worst Badmiral? Hafter, who tried to take Lal away from Data, or Pressman, who illegally tested a Starfleet cloaking device?
Pressman.
And finally, who's chasing you? The Tal Shiar or the Obsidian Order?
The Obsidian Order.
Simulation complete. M5, please compute the results and tell us if our guest has passed the Kobayashi Maru.
Working.
Aly, I am pleased to tell you that the M5 has determined that you have passed the Kobayashi Maru simulation. Congratulations.
Whew, okay. Weight off my shoulders.
So, why is the Obsidian Order chasing you?
They're chasing me because Garrick is mad at me, and now he is a Chancellor of the Obsidian Order.
I have to admit, I was really tossed up on the Plomeek soup from Neelix or the Riker omelets. If you're making food and the only person who can eat it is Worf, I mean, that's, I don't know.
I don't know, Neelix. I'm interested after my Voyager rewatch. I've been interested to hopefully someday have some or make some Neelix recipes.
Is there a Neelix cookbook out there? There has to be.
God, there should be if there's not.
That has to exist. It has to exist. I feel that in our fandom, it just has to exist somewhere.
I bet it does.
All right. And now, the M5, who has analyzed your answers, will award you an honorary Star Trek title on behalf of our podcast. M5, what title shall we award our guest?
Aly is awarded the title of Public Relations Director for Starfleet Command.
So there you go.
Wow. That's funny because my ideal job would be PR for NASA. So, hey.
There you go. Wish it, and it could be so. Aly, please tell people how they can get in touch with you.
There are multiple ways that you can get in touch with me. I'm probably the easiest or easily reached on Twitter. My tag is @TTrekkie. It's also the same on Instagram. You can go to my website at ttrekkie.wordpress.com. And I'm always up for if you want to DM me. You can also send me an email. My email is the@ttrekkie@gmail.com.
Aly, thank you so much for being part of Trek Profiles.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun. You really challenged me to think about all these questions and what Star Trek means to me. So thank you.
Here ends this installment of the Trek Profiles podcast. And before we offer a Trek quote to close this episode, I'd like to remind you, you may send us your friendly suggestions, subspace flame mails, or audio of your latest Star Trek karaoke disaster to feedback@trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or Twitter @TrekProfiles. Anything you send us may be used in the show, or it may be given over to a bunch of packleds to make them go. This week, I leave you with a quote from Hugh the Borgling, who in the episode I, Borg discovered that, quote, resistance is not futile, unquote. Thanks for listening, and live long and prosper.